Hey folks, today we're covering Tinto Talks 50 for Project Caesar, aka EU5, and this week I was going to say Johan, but it's actually St. Dave UK taking over to tell us about formable countries. And if you haven't played Europa Universalis, don't worry, they're going to explain what all this means. So what are formable countries? Well, they are basically new tags that you can switch to in-game. Typically they represent historical unions and conquests, but some represent aspirations that were never materialized. If you played EU4, you know exactly what all this means. If you haven't, a new tag is generally when you switch to another country name. So say you're playing in England and then you colonize North America, well then you could form like Canada, the United States, things like that. Or if you're in Europe, you could form Germany, Italy. These countries that don't actually exist at the start of the game, you can form them during your campaigns. Generally speaking, the vision behind formables is to offer role-playing and historical immersion and support player fantasies rather than modifier stacking. We've seen that mentioned a few times. Hopefully that is true around modifier stacking. They will change your country name, your national flag, and map color. So while you can unlock some content, such as advances and minor unique content, the tag change is often the goal itself. So really saying like this isn't a total rebirth of your nation. Your nation will generally play the same, but it will look different, different colors, different flags, but there will be some content. So you can form like the United States, and I'm sure there's content around the United States that you wouldn't be able to play if you didn't form the United States. So there is going to be some content, but it doesn't sound like, especially for launch, there's going to be a lot of content based around here, but they are going to now cover some of that content. So you can see here two of the unique advances that Spain will get hold of. The first one allowing you to have an extra artist and also the skill of new artists. The second is Spanish naval reforms, monthly navy tradition 0.02, so building into those Spanish fleets that they were quite well known for this era. So as you can see, these aren't like crazy bonuses, but they do lean into what that country was kind of famous for or well known for in this era. So how do you achieve these new tags or new country names really? Rather than your country changing automatically every age, I don't know what that could be a slight dig at. I'm sure it's not just coincidence with the timing there. You achieve it by completing certain objectives. Usually you'll need to control a certain percentage of a predefined set of locations. For example, Scandinavia needs 75% of the locations in the Scandinavian area. In EU4, this is generally how it works. If you play Crusader Kings 3, this is how it works there as well. To create these titles that don't exist, you generally need enough land that was historically part of that to then be able to form that country. On top of the land requirement, however, there are some additional requirements that are generally needed, such as your primary culture belonging to a certain culture group. Forming Spain also requires you and all the independent countries in Iberia to be Christian, as that is thematically closer tied to the completion of the Reconquista. Iberian Muslims have the reverse rules for forming Al-Andalus, so there we go. You can form Spain if you're Christian, but the same area of the map, you can form Al-Andalus if you're Muslim. Some are directly tied to actions in international organizations, like the formation of the HRE or the Ilkhanate. Formables also have a tier which represents their natural order of precedence. You can only form countries that are the same tier or higher than you. For example, England can form Great Britain, but Great Britain can't form England. The AI will only form a country that is higher than their current tier. I think that makes sense. This is so you can't keep forming countries within your country that didn't exist at the start. I see why it works this way. I believe that's how it worked in EU4 as well. Next, we can see this screenshot. You'll just get this nice button. You can click this button, form new country, and it will initiate this process. There are going to be 3 rules, however, in the game rules. So you can change it so only historical countries can be formed, for example, Spain and Great Britain, but other ones that are ahistorical, they can't be formed in the game. You can allow plausible formable countries. This is on by default. These are countries like Germany and Italy, countries that could plausibly have formed or just after the time period will be allowed. Allow ahistorical formable countries. So these are like the North Sea Empire, one of the best empires to form in Crusader Kings 3. If you control Britain and Scandinavia and Europa, these are fantasy countries or aspirational countries or titles that have never existed but could have happened in a different version of history. So those are the 3 tiers, ones that actually formed during the time period of the game, and then titles that formed generally just after the time period of the game, but in a different version of history, could have formed that little bit earlier. And then the third one, ones that never existed but could exist, or there were aspirations by people to make these that never happened. So especially the North Sea Empire, if you play Crusader Kings 3, do make that empire. It's really cool the stuff you can do as that empire. Next is going to show off some examples of this. So form Great Britain. Some countries have different flags depending on the exact manner of which they were formed. For example, this version of the Union Jack, as you can see, I didn't spot this immediately actually. This is one where you started as Scotland and you formed Great Britain. So you can see the Scottish flag is actually above the other flags that make up the Great British flag. And that is pretty cool. There's different versions of this. I imagine if you play as Wales, the Welsh bit is a bit more prominent. We'll see those obviously at a later time. Next is Form Russia. Some formables come with little treats to sweeten the deal. So our country rank will become Empire, and you can unify the Russian culture group, and that is pretty cool as well for Form Russia. The next one is Prussia. The Teutonic Order has a long way to go before they can become Prussia, and you can see all the requirements to hit this. You have to have a certain government reform, your clergy cannot be too powerful, the nobility have to have land rights, the nobility has to have another privilege, the clergy has less than 20% power, the nobility has greater than 20% power, and you also need to be at peace. So there are some requirements to hit some of these that are going to be difficult to hit. Maybe not too difficult, but it isn't as easy just owning the lands that were historically Prussia. You need to hit these other requirements, which kind of happened historically. You know, not exactly the same. Nobody's keeping tag of percentages in real life like this, but it's really pushing you towards like roughly what historically happened to form these countries. And then, of course, if you do form Prussia, these are the bonuses you get. You become a monarchy, you gain 100 devotion, and your country rank will become kingdom. So if you aren't a kingdom already, you do become a kingdom when you form Prussia. The next one, this is one of these like fantasy titles. Never happened, but you can have this happen in game unless you turn it off with the options we saw earlier. This is Form Celtica. Welsh belongs to the Celtic group. You have Celtic traditions government reform, and at least one of these are true, the court language. And then you can form this. I guess this is a version of like Britannia, maybe. I'm not too sure. Maybe it's a larger bit of the United Kingdom that was set up by the Welsh instead of the English. So again, pretty cool to see that in game. And then to finish off the dev diary, there is just a huge list here of all the formable nations you can form. I've put some of them up on the screen now. As always, I will leave a link to this dev diary in the description down below, so you can go look at all of them. I've just done the first 2 screenshots I could get, but there's probably at least 100 of them here. These are the ones that are currently in the game. They do say, do leave feedback on the forum post with any additional ones that you think they might want to add. And this is pretty cool. It shows the formable name, the tier they are, and then a note. So are they ahistorical? Are they plausible? So you can see here, Rome is ahistorical because the Roman Empire had fallen apart, but it wouldn't be a Paradox game if you couldn't form the Roman Empire. So you can do that. There's the HRE, there's Iran, there's Celtica that they just showed off. There's the Latin Empire, the North Sea Empire, Canada, Egypt, Italy, Ruthenia, Scandinavia, Bengal, Delhi, Ethiopia, Great Britain, all these different titles that you can form during your campaign, but that aren't in the game at the start of the game. Again, this is an earlier start date than EU4. It's 1337. So some of these would be in EU4 potentially, but in EU5, as we're starting a little bit earlier, some of these weren't formed till after the start date in this version of the game. But take a look through there. As they say, do leave feedback if there's any you think they're missing that are interesting to have in the game. But on that note, we'll leave it there for today. A nice quick dev diary. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed your time here today. I'm covering EU5 up to official announcement, launch and beyond, and I also cover Crusader Kings in a very similar manner. So anyway, we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you all next time.